"Get on the floor before I put you there," Sergeant Dale Morris shouted, loud enough for every sleeping house on North Calder Avenue to hear. Agent Simone Carter stood barefoot in her own living room at 2:07 in the morning, wearing gray sweatpants, a plain white shirt, and a thin gold chain that had belonged to her father. One hand was raised. The other was still near the kitchen chair she had pushed back when the first police car stopped outside. Splinters from her front door lay across the floor like broken bones. Cold blue light flashed through the curtains. Her cracked phone screen glowed on the table beside an open laptop. 4 local police officers pointed weapons at her. No one asked her name. No one let her reach for identification. No one listened when she said, "I am a federal agent." Morris laughed once and said, "Sure, and I am the president." Outside, Mrs. Helen Brooks watched from behind her front window with trembling hands pressed against the glass. A young officer named Ryan Blake stood near the hallway, trying to hide the doubt already rising in his face. Then his flashlight swept across the living room wall and stopped on a black jacket hanging from a wooden hook. 3 large letters were printed across the back. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Within minutes, Morris would stop laughing. Within minutes, the officers who had stormed into Simone Carter's house would realize they had not broken into the home of a helpless suspect. They had broken into the center of a federal corruption investigation, and the evidence they came to bury was waiting in the room with them. But before the room went silent, there was the crash. The first sound was not the police shout, it was the tires, a hard scrape of rubber against wet pavement outside the small brick house at the end of North Calder Avenue. The street was quiet before that. Too quiet. A rainstorm had passed through Baltimore just after midnight, leaving the sidewalk shining under the yellow street lamps. Water ran along the curb in thin silver lines. The old oak tree outside Mrs. Brooks' house dripped steadily onto the hood of her parked sedan. Inside number 41, Simone Carter sat alone at her kitchen table. Her laptop was open. Beside it was a black external drive, a folder of printed reports, and a white ceramic mug filled with coffee gone cold. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. 2:04 in the morning. She had been awake for 18 hours. On the laptop screen was a case file named Operation Iron Halo. Below that were folders with plain names: search warrant irregularities, anonymous tip pattern, evidence custody gaps, officer payment links, Sergeant Dale Morris. Simone stared at the last folder longer than the others. She had been building the case for 7 months, not loudly, not publicly, quietly, the way dangerous cases needed to be built. A local narcotics network had been moving through the east side of the city for years. Small business owners paid protection money. Witnesses changed their stories. Drugs appeared in houses after police raids. Some people went to jail, fast. Too fast. Poor families. Black families. People with no lawyers powerful enough to make anyone uncomfortable. The paperwork always looked clean. That was the problem. Clean lies survive longer. Simone reached for the external drive and checked the backup progress. 98%. She exhaled slowly. 2 more minutes. Then came the tires. Her eyes moved to the window. A second vehicle stopped outside. Then a third. No siren, only blue lights splashing across the curtains. Simone closed the laptop halfway, but did not shut it down. Her training took over before fear could. She picked up her phone and pressed one contact. Thomas Reed, her partner in the federal investigation. The call had not connected before a fist slammed against her front door. "Police, open the door." Simone stepped into the hall. She kept her voice clear. "This is Agent Simone Carter. Identify your warrant and supervisor." A pause, then another pound against the door. "Police, open the door now." Simone moved toward the small table near the entryway where her federal credentials were locked in the top drawer. She was 3 steps away when Sergeant Morris yelled from outside, "Breach it!" The door exploded inward. Wood cracked. The metal chain tore from the frame. A framed photograph fell from the wall and shattered on the floor. Simone stopped instantly and raised both hands. 4 officers rushed in. Morris came first, broad shoulders, gray mustache, black tactical vest. Jaw set with the confidence of a man who had never been questioned by anyone he considered beneath him. Behind him came Officer Ryan Blake, young, pale, breathing too fast. Then Officer Carla Denton, tight-faced and silent. Then Officer Miles Harlan, who swept his weapon toward the hallway before the house had even been cleared. Morris pointed at Simone. "Down, now." Simone did not move quickly. Quick movement got people killed in rooms like this. She spoke slowly. "My name is Simone Carter. I am a federal agent. My credentials are in the front drawer beside you." Morris stepped closer. "Hands where I can see them." "They are where you can see them, on the floor." "You need to call your captain." He smiled. "You do not give orders in this house." Simone looked at the broken door behind him. "This is my house." "Not tonight," Morris said. That sentence told her more than the warrant would have. Officer Denton moved behind Simone and pulled her hands down. Simone felt the cold metal of handcuffs close around her wrists. Ryan Blake looked at the cuffs, then at Simone's face. Something about her calm bothered him. Most people screamed during raids. Some cried. Some begged. Some cursed. Simone did none of that. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes were sharp. Not arrogant. Not panicked. Watching. Morris noticed too, and it irritated him. "You always this calm when police find you with dirty evidence?" Simone said, "You have not found evidence. We will." That was the second sentence that mattered. Not "we might," "we will." He had already decided what the house was before he entered it. Officer Harlan moved into the kitchen and saw the laptop. He reached for it. Simone's voice cut through the room. "Do not touch that computer." Harlan froze for half a second. Morris looked over. "What is in it?" "Federal material." Morris laughed again. "Federal material. That is a new one." He walked to the kitchen table and glanced at the screen. The laptop had dimmed but not locked. The words "Operation Iron Halo" were still faintly visible. Simone shifted her weight. Morris saw the movement. Nervous now. No. Concerned. About what? About the number of federal laws you are about to violate. For the first time, Officer Ryan Blake looked at the laptop, then at Simone, then toward the living room wall. His flashlight beam moved across a shelf, over a framed photograph of an older black man in a mechanic uniform, over a row of legal textbooks, over a small American flag folded inside a case, and then stopped. A black jacket hung from a wooden hook near the hallway. Across the back, in large yellow letters, were the words, "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Ryan stopped breathing for 1 second. He moved closer. Beside the jacket was a metal badge case, not open, not displayed like a decoration, resting beside a lanyard from the Washington field office. Under it was a framed commendation certificate with Simone's full name printed across the center. Special Agent Simone Carter, Public Corruption Task Force. Ryan turned slowly. "Sergeant," he said. Morris did not look at him. "Search the bedroom." "Sergeant, you need to see this." Morris turned with irritation. "What?" Ryan pointed with the flashlight. The beam shook slightly. Morris followed the light. The smile left his face. For 2 seconds, nobody spoke. Outside, rainwater dripped from the roof. Inside, The broken front door creaked against the wall. Officer Denton looked from the jacket to Simone handcuffed wrists and swallowed. Morris stepped closer to the wall. Anyone can buy a jacket. Ryan lifted the badge case from the shelf with 2 fingers. Careful now. Suddenly careful in the way he had not been careful with the door. "There is a federal credential number," Ryan said. Morris snapped. "Put that down!" Simone looked at him. "That is the first correct instruction you have given tonight." Morris turned toward her. "You think this changes anything?" "Yes," Simone said. Her voice was still calm, but the room heard the difference. "It changes who will be asking questions." At that exact moment, Morris' phone began to ring. The screen lit up with the name Captain Elaine Porter. Morris stared at it. No one moved. He answered. "Captain, we are executing the warrant." Her voice came through sharp enough that even Simone could hear pieces of it. "Dale, where are you?" "North Calder." "Which address?" 41. The line went silent. Then Captain Porter spoke slower. "Dale, tell me you did not just enter the home of Simone Carter." Morris' face tightened. "Who?" Captain Porter's voice dropped. "Special Agent Simone Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Officer Denton lowered her weapon. Officer Harlan stepped away from the laptop. Ryan Blake looked at Simone's cuffs. And Sergeant Dale Morris, who had laughed when she told him the truth, finally had nothing to say. Simone held his stare across the broken room. "You should have let me reach the drawer." 4 days before Sergeant Dale Morris kicked in her door, Simone Carter stood in the produce aisle of a small grocery store on East Landvale Street, holding a basket with oranges, oatmeal, and a carton of eggs. To anyone watching, she looked ordinary. That was the point. She wore a faded brown coat, dark jeans, and plain running shoes. Her hair was pulled back under a navy scarf. No badge, no visible weapon, no government vehicle outside, no partner beside her. No sign that the quiet woman comparing prices on apples was one of the most disciplined federal agents in the Public Corruption Task Force. Across the aisle, 2 local officers laughed near the checkout counter. One of them was Sergeant Dale Morris. Simone did not look at him directly. She studied the apples, but her phone camera, half hidden beneath a folded shopping list, caught the reflection in the freezer glass behind him. Morris leaned toward the store owner, a tired Korean man named Daniel Cho, and tapped 2 fingers against the counter. Not a friendly tap. A reminder. Daniel reached under the register and placed a white envelope beside a stack of lottery slips. Morris covered it with his palm and smiled. People thought corruption looked dramatic. It often looked like a man buying gum. Simone placed 3 apples into her basket and walked past the counter without slowing down. Morris did not notice her. He had seen her in the neighborhood before and dismissed her as just another woman living alone in the wrong part of town. That was useful. Being underestimated had kept Simone alive more than once. Outside, the evening air smelled of rain and fried food from the carryout shop on the corner. Simone walked 2 blocks before turning into an alley behind a closed barber shop. There, she took out her phone and sent one message to her partner. Thomas. Visual handoff confirmed. Morris received envelope from Daniel Cho at 6:42 in the evening. Possible protection payment. Agent Thomas Reed replied within 10 seconds. Copy. Do not engage. Simone almost smiled. Thomas always wrote that. Do not engage. As if she needed to be reminded. She had built her career on patience. Not weakness. Patience. There was a difference. Her case was called Operation Iron Halo because the corruption hid behind the appearance of protection. A halo made of iron, bright from a distance, heavy when it came down on your neck. For 7 months, Simone had lived inside the pattern. anonymous tips that always targeted the same blocks, search warrants signed with suspicious speed, body camera gaps at the exact moments evidence appeared, cash deposits into accounts connected to officers who were supposed to be living on public salaries, small business owners paying so their windows would not be broken, witnesses suddenly changing their stories after late-night visits. And behind too many of those moments stood Sergeant Dale Morris. He was not a cartoon villain. That made him more dangerous. He knew how to sound reasonable. He knew how to speak in report language. He knew how to look into a camera and say he feared for officer safety. He knew which judges moved fast, which supervisors looked away, and which neighborhoods could be raided without anyone powerful asking questions. To some residents, he was tough on crime. To others, he was the reason they slept with shoes beside the bed. Simone had first noticed his name in a case file from a wrong address raid. The police report said the door had been opened voluntarily. The body camera showed the door had been rammed. The report said the suspect reached toward the couch. The video showed a grandmother trying to pull a child away from broken glass. The report said evidence was found in plain sight. But the kitchen camera from a neighbor across the alley showed an officer entering with one hand inside his jacket. That officer had been part of Morris' team. The complaint was closed in 11 days. No violation found. That phrase appeared so often in the files that Simone began writing it in the margins. No violation found. No violation found. No violation found. A system could bury a body with paperwork if nobody forced it to dig. Simone wanted more than one bad raid. She wanted the chain, the officers, the source of the fake tips, the money, the supervisors who knew, the prosecutors who should have asked harder questions, the people in jail because someone with a badge needed a clean arrest number. That was why she lived in the small brick house at number 41 North Calder Avenue. It was not safe, but it was close. Close to the corner store where envelopes changed hands. Close to the vacant auto shop where informants met. Close to the alley where patrol cars parked without logging stops. Close to the fear. And fear, if you listened carefully, had a map. Mrs. Helen Brooks, who lived across the street, noticed Simone long before anyone else did. Helen was 73 years old, with silver hair, a bad left knee, and the habit of watching the block through lace curtains. She knew every car that did not belong, every teenager cutting through the alley, every dog that barked at the wrong hour. At first, Helen did not trust Simone. The young woman kept strange hours. Sometimes she came home after midnight. Sometimes men in plain clothes visited for 10 minutes and left without coffee. Sometimes she sat on the front steps at dusk and watched the street as if she was waiting for something to confess. But then came the day Helen dropped a bag of groceries on her porch. A jar broke. Milk spilled across the steps. Before Helen could bend down, Simone crossed the street and cleaned it up without making a show of kindness. Helen said, "You do not talk much, do you?" Simone picked up the broken glass carefully. "I listen more than I talk." Helen studied her. "That can be dangerous around here." Simone looked across the street at a patrol car rolling slowly past the corner. "I know." Helen did not ask more, but after that she began leaving porch light on when Simone came home late. Small kindness. Quiet witness. Sometimes that was the only protection the neighborhood had. 2 nights before the raid, Simone drove to the Baltimore field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation under heavy rain. The building sat behind concrete barriers and glass doors that reflected the city in broken pieces. Inside Conference Room 4B, Thomas Reed waited with 2 cups of coffee and a stack of case folders. He was 46, white, careful, and difficult to impress. He had spent 20 years watching public officials lie with calm faces. He trusted evidence more than people. and Simone more than almost anyone. "You were late," he said. Simone took the coffee. "You bought the weak coffee again." "You are welcome." She opened her laptop and connected the external drive. On the screen appeared a map of eastern Baltimore, marked with red dots. Each dot represented a raid connected to an anonymous tip. Each blue circle represented an officer involved. Each yellow line represented a payment, a phone call, or a missing body camera segment. Thomas leaned over the table. "That is not a pattern anymore." "No," Simone said. "It is a structure." At the center of the web were 3 names: Sergeant Dale Morris, Officer Miles Harlan, Captain Elaine Porter. Thomas tapped Porter's name. "You are sure she is involved?" Simone did not answer quickly. That was her rule. Never move faster than the evidence. "I am sure she knew enough to stop it," she said. "I am not sure yet whether she profited. That difference may matter later." "It always matters." Thomas nodded. "What do you need?" 48 hours? For what? Final backup from Daniel Cho. He has payment dates and names. He is scared, but he is ready. Thomas frowned. If Cho talks, Morris panics. Morris is already panicking. Simone opened another file. A transcript filled the screen. An informant had recorded a conversation outside a bar called the Iron Lantern. A male voice said, "Someone around Calder is sniffing too close. Find out who. If they have files, take them before they hand them off." Thomas read the line twice. "Get out of the house tonight." Simone shook her head. "Not yet." Thomas stared at her. "Simone, if I leave too soon, they know someone warned me. If you stay too long, they come through your door." She looked at the transcript. "Then we make sure the door they choose leads to the truth." Thomas did not like that answer. Neither did she. But cases like this did not break because the guilty suddenly confessed. They broke when pressure made them careless. And Morris was close to careless. That night, after the meeting, Simone drove home past row houses, closed churches, and corner stores with metal shutters. Her father, Old Chain, rested against her collarbone. The chain was thin gold, worn smooth with age. Her father, Marcus Carter, had given it to her when she graduated from Quantico. He had not lived to see her first major conviction, but his voice still lived in her. Marcus Carter had been a bus mechanic. Quiet hands, strong back, a laugh that filled rooms when rooms deserved it. When Simone was 13, police stopped him outside a hardware store because he matched the description of a theft suspect. He did not match, not really. Wrong height, wrong jacket, wrong car. But he was a black man carrying a tool bag in the wrong parking lot at the wrong time, and the officers trusted the guess more than the truth. They pushed him against a hood in front of his daughter. They searched his bag. They called him aggressive when he asked why. They let him go after 22 minutes with no apology. 22 minutes. Simone counted them from the sidewalk. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with bruised wrists and told her something she never forgot. "The most dangerous thing is not a bad person with power, baby girl. It is a person with power who thinks he cannot be wrong." That sentence became the foundation of her life. She did not join the Federal Bureau of Investigation because she hated police. She joined because she believed a badge should be held to a higher standard, not used to escape one. A badge could protect. A badge could also become a weapon. The difference was accountability. By the time Simone reached her house that night, it was nearly midnight. Helen Brooks' porch light was on across the street. Simone paused at her own door and looked back at it. A small light in a frightened block. She almost called Thomas. almost told him he was right, almost packed the drive and left. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Cho. "I have the ledger, tomorrow night. Please do not let them know I helped." Simone stood in the rain for several seconds. Then she unlocked her door. Inside, the house was quiet. Simple. Nothing expensive. A blue sofa, 2 lamps, a bookshelf of legal texts and old novels, a framed photograph of her father in his mechanic uniform, a wooden hook near the hallway where her black Federal Bureau of Investigation jacket hung because she had returned late from the field office and had not put it away. She looked at the jacket, then at her father picture. "I am close," she whispered. The house gave no answer, but truth rarely answers before it is ready. The next evening, Daniel Cho met Simone behind the closed barber shop at 8:35. His hands trembled as he gave her a folded envelope and a small drive wrapped in a receipt. "They will know," he said. "Not if we move carefully. You do not know Morris." Simone looked at him. "I know men like Morris." Daniel shook his head. "No, he is worse when he is scared." That line stayed with her. At 11:48 that night, Simone called Thomas from her kitchen. "I have the ledger. Upload now." "Already started." "How long?" "The encrypted backup says about 2 hours." Thomas cursed under his breath. "Simone, leave the house. Bring the drive. If I move now, anyone watching knows the transfer mattered. They may already know. Then let them wonder what I kept here." Thomas went silent. "You're using yourself as bait." "No," Simone said. "I am using their arrogance as evidence." That was the difference. At 1:59 in the morning, the backup reached 91%. Simone made a second pot of coffee. At 2:03, she heard a car slow near the house. At 2:04, the headlights disappeared. At 2:05, her phone lost signal for 3 seconds. At 2:06, tires scraped against the curb. At 2:07, Sergeant Dale Morris shouted through her door, "Police, open the door!" Simone stood from the kitchen table. For 1 second she wanted to run. Not from guilt, from exhaustion. From the memory of her father's wrists. From the knowledge that even with a federal badge, even with evidence, even with years of training, a door could still break before the truth got a chance to speak. Her hand touched the gold chain at her neck. Her father's voice came back. Power must be checked by truth. She breathed once. Then she walked toward the entryway. "This is Agent Simone Carter," she called. "Identify your warrant and supervisor." Outside, Morris did not listen. He had already decided what was behind the door. That was why he broke it. The door was already broken. That was what Simone Carter noticed first. Not the weapons, not the shouting, not even the cold metal around her wrists. The door. It hung inward from one twisted hinge, cracked down the center, with splinters scattered across the floor she had cleaned only hours earlier. Rain touched the threshold. Blue light from the police cars flashed across the broken wood, then across the framed photograph of her father, lying face down in shattered glass. That was when anger rose in her chest. Not fear, anger. But Simone did not give Sergeant Dale Morris permission to hold it. She stayed still. Hands cuffed behind her back, bare feet planted on the cold floor, gold chain resting against her collarbone. Morris stood in front of her with the confidence of a man who thought the room already belonged to him. "Start in the bedroom," he said. "Check the drawers, the closet, the vents, anything taped under furniture." Officer Miles Harlan moved toward the hallway. Officer Carla Denton entered the kitchen and began opening cabinets. Officer Ryan Blake remained in the living room, still staring at the black jacket on the wall. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The words were clear. too clear to ignore. Ryan looked at Simone again. Her breathing had not changed. Her eyes had not gone wild. She was not begging, not performing, not trying to invent a story under pressure. She had been telling the truth from the first sentence. And he had helped put cuffs on her anyway. That knowledge landed slowly. Then it got heavier. Sergeant Morris ended the call with Captain Elaine Porter and lowered his phone. His face had changed, but only for a second. Fear had passed through it like lightning behind clouds. Then pride returned and covered it. He pointed at the jacket. Anyone can hang something on a wall. Simone looked at him. You already spoke to your captain. Morris stepped closer. I spoke to a captain who asked a question. She gave you my name. She gave me a name. Ryan said softly, Sergeant. Morris turned on him. Not now. Ryan swallowed. The badge case has a federal credential number. I said not now. The room tightened. Officer Denton returned from the kitchen holding a folder. Sergeant, there are case files on the table. Morris looked relieved. Case files. He needed that word. He needed something that sounded criminal enough to pull the ground back under his feet. Bring them here. Simone's voice was calm. Do not remove federal case material from that table. Morris laughed under his breath. Still giving orders. No, Simone said. Preserving evidence. Morris walked into the kitchen. The laptop sat half open. The external drive beside it blinked with a tiny white light. 99%. Simone saw it, so did Morris. He leaned toward the screen. Operation Iron Halo. He read the words slowly. Then he glanced at the folder names. Search warrant irregularities. Anonymous tip pattern. Evidence custody gaps. Officer payment links. Sergeant Dale Morris. Everything stopped. Morris stared at his own name on the screen. Officer Harlan came back from the bedroom carrying a small lockbox. Found this in the closet. Morris did not answer. He was still looking at the laptop. Simone watched him understand too many things at once. Not enough to become honest, enough to become dangerous. He straightened, shut that laptop. Ryan stepped forward. Sergeant, maybe we should wait for Captain Porter. Morris did not look at him. Shut it. Ryan hesitated. That hesitation mattered. It was small, but it was the first time anyone in the room had not moved immediately when Morris ordered it. Morris saw it too. Officer Blake, are you confused about who is in command here? Ryan looked at Simone, then at the jacket, then at the broken door. No, Sergeant. Then do your job. Ryan moved toward the laptop. Simone spoke before he touched it. If you close that computer before the transfer completes, you may interrupt a federal evidence backup. Ryan froze. Morris turned toward her. What transfer? Simone said nothing. Morris stepped close enough that she could smell coffee and wintergreen gum on his breath. What transfer? Simone looked directly at him. The one you came here to stop. The room went silent. Officer Denton lowered the folder slightly. Harlan looked from Morris to Simone. Ryan backed away from the laptop. Morris smiled, but the smile no longer reached his eyes. You think you are clever. No. You think you set a trap. Simone answered quietly. I think you walked into the truth because you were too proud to knock. That was when Morris lost control of the room, not in a loud way. In a dangerous way. His voice dropped. Search everything. Ryan turned toward him. Sergeant, we need to verify her status. Search everything. The second order came harder. Denton moved first because she had been trained to move when he sounded like that. She opened the file in her hand and saw photographs, call logs, payment charts, warrant copies, and witness statements with names blacked out. Her face changed. "This is not narcotics evidence," she said. Morris looked at her. "What?" She held the pages tighter. "It looks like an internal corruption file. Do not read it. Bag it." Simone turned her head toward Denton. "If you remove that folder, your name will be on the chain of custody violation." Denton stopped. The phrase chain of custody changed things. It brought the room out of street language and into court language. Court language frightened officers more than shouting did. Morris pointed at the kitchen. "Bag it." Denton did not move. Morris' voice sharpened. "Officer Denton." She looked at Simone, then at the folder. Then she set it back on the table. "I think we should wait." Morris stared at her. For a moment, he looked less like a sergeant and more like a man watching his own tools refuse his hand. Then Harlan opened the lockbox. Inside was not money, not drugs, not anything that matched the anonymous tip. Inside were sealed evidence drives, a backup phone, and a photograph of Marcus Carter, Simone's father, standing beside a city bus with grease on his hands and a tired smile on his face. Harlan lifted one of the drives. "This one has a label." Morris snapped, "Put that with the rest." Simone's voice cut across the room. "Read the label." Harlan looked at Morris. Morris said, "Do not." Simone said, "Read it." Ryan stepped closer. "The label matters." Morris turned. "You two want to run this scene now." Nobody answered, but Harlan looked down and read, "Witness protection copy. Do not remove without federal authorization." The room froze again. Witness protection. Those two words were no longer just trouble. They were danger. Simone took one slow breath. If any protected witness is exposed because of this raid, everyone who touched that box will answer for it. Harlan put the drive down as if it had burned him. Outside, voices rose. Neighbors had gathered behind the police tape in bathrobes, coats, slippers, and fear. Doors had opened up and down the block. Blue light flashed across tired faces. People knew the sound of a door being broken in this neighborhood. Some had heard it before. Some had lived it. Mrs. Helen Brooks stood at the edge of her porch with a coat pulled over her nightgown. She could see Simone through the broken doorway, cuffed, barefoot, standing straight. Helen gripped the railing. A young neighbor whispered, "What did she do?" Helen did not answer, because she was beginning to understand that the better question was, what had been done to Simone? Inside, Morris turned toward Officer Denton. "Close the curtains." Denton did not move. Morris glared. "I said close the curtains." Ryan spoke before Denton could. "Why?" Morris stared at him. "What did you say?" Ryan swallowed. "Why close them?" Morris took one step toward him. "Because this is an active scene." Ryan looked toward the broken doorway where neighbors watched. "Or because people can see." The sentence was not loud, but it changed the room. Morris' face hardened. "You are one sentence away from losing that badge." Ryan looked down at the badge on his own chest. For a moment, he was a rookie again. 27 years old, 2 years on the force, student loans, a sick mother, a career he had wanted because he believed the uniform could mean something good. He had followed Morris because Morris was powerful, because Morris wrote evaluations, because Morris could make a young officer life easy or impossible. That was the trap. Bad power rarely works alone. It surrounds itself with people who are afraid to become its next target. Ryan looked at Simone. She did not ask him for help. Somehow that made it harder. She was not pleading. She was waiting to see what kind of officer he would become. Then Morris' radio crackled. A voice came through. "Captain Porter is en route. Federal units also responding." Federal units? Morris stared at the radio. Officer Harlan whispered, "Federal units?" Simone looked toward the laptop. The backup bar reached 100%. Complete. A small chime sounded. Tiny, almost gentle. It was the loudest sound in the room. Morris heard it. His eyes moved to the external drive. Simone saw the calculation in his face. He had come for something. Now he knew something existed. Morris moved toward the table. "Stop," Simone said. He ignored her. Ryan stepped between Morris and the laptop. "Sergeant, we should not touch that." Morris looked at him with disbelief. "Move." Ryan did not. The room held its breath. For the first time that night, someone with a badge stood between Morris and the evidence. Morris' voice went low. "Do you know what you are doing?" Ryan answered, "I think I am finally doing it." Before Morris could respond, headlights filled the broken doorway. Not blue lights, white lights. 3 black vehicles stopped outside the house with quiet precision. Doors opened. Men and women in dark jackets stepped into the rain. No shouting, no rushing, no wasted movement. Agent Thomas Reed entered first. He took in the broken door, the scattered glass, the handcuffs on Simone's wrists, the open laptop, the federal jacket on the wall, and Sergeant Morris standing 2 steps from protected evidence. His face changed only once, barely. Then his voice cut through the room. "Take the cuffs off her," Morris said. "We are executing a local warrant." Thomas did not raise his voice. "Take the cuffs off Special Agent Carter. Now." No one moved. Then Ryan Blake stepped behind Simone and unlocked the cuffs with hands that shook harder than he wanted them to. The metal opened. Simone brought her wrists forward. Red marks circled both of them. Thomas saw the marks. His eyes went cold. Morris tried again. "We had an anonymous tip." Thomas looked at the broken door. "You breached the home of a federal agent on an undercover public corruption case based on an anonymous tip." Morris' jaw tightened. "We did not know she was federal." Simone rubbed one wrist and looked at him. "You did not know because you refused to listen." Captain Elaine Porter arrived behind the federal team, coat thrown over business clothes, hair still pinned from whatever call had dragged her out of bed. She stepped through the doorway and saw the jacket first, then Simone, then Morris. "Dale," she said. Just one word, but it carried fear. Morris turned toward her. "Captain, she had files on us." The sentence came out before he could stop it. "Files on us. Not files, not suspicious material. Us." Thomas Reed looked at Simone. Simone looked at Morris. Everything froze. Morris had not confessed. Not exactly. But in a room full of federal agents, body cameras, witnesses, and broken wood, he had said enough to show where his mind was. Captain Porter closed her eyes for 1 second. Ryan Blake looked down. Denton stared at the floor. Harlan stopped moving. Simone stepped forward, no longer cuffed. The power in the room shifted without anyone shouting. She looked at Morris. "That is the first true thing you have said tonight." Morris said nothing. Simone turned to Thomas. "Secure the laptop, secure the drives, photograph the broken entry." Collect body camera footage from every local officer. No one leaves until Federal Evidence Control clears them. Thomas nodded, already moving. Federal agents entered the kitchen and living room with gloves, cameras, bags, and quiet discipline. Officer Denton stepped back. Harlan held both hands away from his pockets. Ryan turned his body camera toward the table to preserve the scene. Morris watched the house he had invaded become a federal evidence site around him. The room he thought he controlled no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the record. And the record had just started speaking. The record had just started speaking. And Sergeant Dale Morris finally understood that the room was no longer listening to him first. Federal agents moved through Simone Carter House with quiet precision. One photographed the broken front door. One documented the shattered frame on the hallway floor. One placed evidence markers beside the glass from her father's picture. Another stood over the kitchen table and waited for Simone's permission before touching the laptop. That alone told everyone the difference. The local officers had stormed in as if the house belonged to them. The federal team entered as if the truth belonged to the evidence. Agent Thomas Reed looked at Simone. "Are you able to continue?" Simone flexed her wrists once. Red marks circled both of them. "Yes." Thomas' voice lowered. "You do not have to prove anything right now." Simone looked toward Morris. "I am not proving anything to him." "Then why continue?" "Because this is what he expected me not to survive calmly." Thomas did not answer. He understood. Sometimes composure was not pride. Sometimes it was a shield. Captain Elaine Porter stood near the living room entrance with rain still on her coat. She kept glancing at the Federal Bureau of Investigation jacket on the wall, as if the letters might change if she looked long enough. They did not. Officer Ryan Blake stood by the kitchen doorway. His body camera was still running. Officer Carla Denton kept her hands visible. Officer Miles Harlan shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to look still and failing. Morris was the only one pretending the night had not changed. He pointed toward Thomas. "You cannot detain my team without cause." Thomas looked at him. "You entered a federal agent home. You touched active case material. You interfered with a protected evidence backup. And one of your officers removed a sealed drive from a lockbox." Morris' jaw tightened. Nobody removed anything. Simone looked toward Harlan. Harlan did not look back. That small choice mattered. Fear often turns the body before the mouth confesses. Thomas turned to the evidence control agent. "Begin integrity check." The agent nodded. "All local officers will place phones, radios, secondary devices, and outer jackets on the table for documentation." Morris stepped forward. "Absolutely not." Simone looked at him. "Strange. That sounds familiar." Morris' eyes flashed. "You think this is funny?" "No, I think it is instructive." Captain Porter finally spoke. "Agent Carter, perhaps we should slow this down. There has clearly been a serious mistake." Simone turned to her. "A mistake is when someone knocks on the wrong door." Porter said nothing. Simone continued. "This was a forced entry at 2:07 in the morning based on an anonymous tip, without verifying the resident, without letting me reach identification, with federal material in plain view, and with a supervisor who ordered officers to keep searching after he saw his own name in my case file." The room went still again. Porter looked at Morris. His face hardened. She said, "Dale." Morris snapped. "She had a file on me." Thomas stepped in. "That is not a crime." Morris pointed toward Simone. "It is when she is hiding evidence in a narcotics investigation." Simone walked slowly to the kitchen table. One federal agent stepped aside to give her room. She did not touch the laptop. She simply looked at the screen. Operation Iron Halo. The backup was complete. The white light on the external drive blinked once every few seconds. Calm. Patient. Alive. Simone said, "There is no narcotics investigation here. There is a public corruption investigation, and you are in it." Morris laughed, but it sounded thin now. Convenient. "No," Simone said. "Documented." Thomas opened a secure tablet. Simone gave him the access phrase, "North Star after midnight." The device unlocked. On the screen was a dashboard of files. Not flashy, not dramatic, just folders arranged with the patience of someone who knew courtrooms did not reward emotion. They rewarded proof. Thomas opened the first file. Anonymous tip pattern. A map of East Baltimore appeared. Red dots marked addresses raided over the past 18 months. Blue lines connected those raids to officer teams. Yellow circles marked tips traced to prepaid phones. Simone pointed to 3 dots. These 3 raids involved anonymous tips from phones activated within the same 6-block radius. Each raid resulted in evidence being found after body cameras went dark. Each report was reviewed by Captain Porter's office and closed as compliant. Porter's face tightened. I did not personally review every raid. Simone looked at her. That may become part of the problem. Thomas opened another file. Body camera gaps. A table filled the screen. Raid date, address, officer present, camera interruption, evidence discovered after interruption. Morris' name appeared again, and again, and again. Ryan Blake stared at the table. His face changed with each line. He had heard rumors. Every department had rumors. Stories told in locker rooms, jokes about making a house tell the truth, warnings about which sergeants got results. Ryan had ignored most of it, because ignoring was easier than discovering he was surrounded by rot. Now the rumors had timestamps. That was harder to avoid. Simone looked at him. "Officer Blake?" Ryan lifted his head. "Before entering my home, did you ask Sergeant Morris whether the tip had been independently verified?" Ryan swallowed. "Yes." "What did he say?" Morris stepped forward. "Do not answer that." Thomas looked at Morris. "He can answer as a witness." Ryan looked at Captain Porter. "Porter did not rescue him." Ryan's voice was quiet. He said I was new and did not understand. He said people like that always say they are innocent until we find what they hide. The room fell silent. Simone closed her eyes for half a second, not because the sentence surprised her, because it did not. Thomas looked at Morris. "People like that." Morris said, "I was speaking generally." Simone opened her eyes. "No, you were speaking clearly." Officer Denton looked down. Simone turned to her. "Officer Denton, when you opened the folder on my kitchen table, what did you see?" Denton hesitated. Morris said, "Carla." Denton did not look at him. She looked at Simone. "Case documents, payment charts, search warrant copies, names of officers. It did not look like narcotics evidence." "Did Sergeant Morris order you to bag it?" "Yes." "Did you bag it?" "No." "Why not?" Denton took a breath. "Because you said it was federal case material, and because the folder looked like exactly what you said it was." Morris shook his head. "Unbelievable," Simone said. "No. Believable. That is why it matters." Then Thomas opened the next file, the Iron Lantern recording. The room changed. Even Morris went still. The recording had been captured 3 nights earlier, outside a bar on Harford Road. The audio was not perfect. Rain hit a metal awning, cars passed, someone laughed in the background. But the voices were clear enough. A male voice said, "Someone around Calder is sniffing too close." Another voice said, "You know who." First voice said, "Not yet, but if they have files, take them before they hand them off." Thomas paused the audio. He looked at Morris. "Would you like to identify that voice?" Morris said nothing. Simone looked at Porter. "Captain?" Porter's jaw tightened. "I recognize the voice." Thomas asked, "Whose voice is it?" Porter did not want to say it. Everyone knew. That was why she had to. Sergeant Morris. The name landed in the room like a door closing. Morris turned on her. "Elaine?" Porter flinched at the first name. Not Captain, Elaine. Too familiar. Thomas noticed. Simone noticed too. Ryan noticed last, and when he did, shame crossed his face. The kind that comes when a young officer realizes the chain of command may not have been a chain at all. It may have been a net. Thomas said, "Captain Porter, you will remain available for interview." Porter's voice sharpened. "I am cooperating." Simone looked at her. Cooperation starts when protection stops. Before Porter could respond, the evidence control agent spoke from the kitchen. "We have a missing item." Simone turned. "Which item?" "One external drive from the lockbox. Slot 3 is empty. Label log shows witness copy 3. A coldness moved through the room. Witness copy 3 contained protected material. Not the entire case, but enough. Photographs, partial names, meeting locations, audio identifiers. If the wrong person saw it, people could disappear before sunrise. Thomas looked at every local officer. No one leaves. Morris said, "You have no authority to search us." Thomas looked at him. "Federal evidence was removed from a protected lockbox during your unlawful entry." "Yes, I do." Morris's voice rose. "Unlawful has not been established." Simone stepped closer. "Your warrant listed suspected controlled substances at 41 North Calder Avenue, second floor, rear apartment." She waited. The room understood slowly. Then Ryan looked around. "This is a single-family house." Simone nodded. "There is no second-floor rear apartment." Thomas took the warrant copy from a federal agent and read it aloud. 41 North Calder Avenue, second floor, rear apartment. Informant states narcotics and proceeds stored in bedroom closet. He looked at Morris. "There is no second floor, no rear apartment. And the bedroom closet contained sealed federal evidence." Morris said, "Informants get details wrong." Simone answered, "But you still got the door right." Silence. She continued, "That means the address was chosen carefully, but the warrant language was recycled carelessly." Thomas looked at the warrant again. "Who prepared the affidavit?" Ryan spoke before Morris could. "Sergeant Morris drafted it. Assistant State Attorney Harlan reviewed by phone. Judge Mallory signed electronically at 1:38 in the morning." Thomas looked up. 1:38. Simone checked the clock. Less than 30 minutes before entry. Ryan nodded. Morris said, "Emergency circumstances." Simone asked, "What emergency?" "Officer safety." "Whose safety?" Morris had no answer. Then Denton spoke. "There was no briefing about weapons in the house." Everyone turned. Denton looked terrified now, but she continued. "The tip only said narcotics and records. No weapon, no threat, no hostage, no destruction in progress." Thomas looked at Morris. "So why breach?" Morris stared at him. "Because waiting gives people time to flush evidence." Simone's voice was quiet. "Or upload it." Morris did not answer. That was answer enough. The evidence control agent began documenting each local officer belongings: phones, radios, gloves, jackets, flashlights. Not as punishment, as procedure. Real procedure. The kind Morris had invoked all night without respecting. Ryan placed his phone and radio down first, then Denton, then Harlan. Harlan's hands shook. Simone noticed. Thomas noticed. Morris noticed too, but too late. The agent checked Harlan's jacket pockets and found nothing. Then she checked his tactical vest. In the inside carrier pocket, behind a folded pair of gloves, she found a small black drive wrapped in a grocery receipt. The room stopped breathing. The label was still attached. Witness copy 3. Harlan's face collapsed. I did not know what it was. Morris turned on him. Shut up. Thomas stepped closer. Officer Harlan, who told you to take that drive? Harlan looked at Morris. Morris stared back with pure warning. Simone watched the fight happen inside Harlan's face. Career, freedom, loyalty, fear, truth. Harlan whispered. He said to grab anything that looked like files before the feds got here. Morris barked. He is lying. Then Ryan Blake raised his hand slowly. My body camera may have captured something. Morris turned. Do not. Ryan looked at him. For the first time that night, he did not look away. I am sorry, Sergeant. Thomas said, preserve and play it. Ryan removed his body camera under federal supervision. The footage was copied to a secure device. A few minutes later, the audio played through Thomas' tablet. The image shook. Officers moved through the broken house. Simone could be heard warning them not to touch the computer. Morris' voice came through low, almost hidden beneath movement. If she has anything, bring it before anyone else gets here. Then Harlan voice. What kind of anything? Morris. Files, drives, I do not care. Move. The recording ended. No one spoke. Not for a long time. Captain Porter's face had gone pale. Denton covered her mouth. Harlan sat down hard in a kitchen chair. Morris stared at Ryan with a kind of hatred that had nothing left to hide behind. You just ended your career, Morris said. Ryan's voice shook. Maybe. Then he looked at Simone. But I think I saved the part of it that matters. Simone held his gaze. For the first time, her face softened. Only a little, but enough. Thomas turned to Morris. Sergeant Dale Morris, you are being detained for obstruction of a federal investigation, unlawful seizure of federal evidence, and conspiracy to interfere with a protected witness investigation. Morris stepped back. You cannot arrest me in front of my own captain. Porter did not move. Thomas said, she is not in charge of this scene. Federal agents moved in. Morris raised his hand slightly, not surrendering, only realizing too late that the rules he had used on others now applied to him. He looked at Simone. This is not over. Simone stepped closer. Wrists still marked red, father chain resting against her throat. No, she said. It is finally beginning. As agents placed restraints on Morris, Mrs. Helen Brooks stood outside in the rain with both hands over her mouth. She had watched police pull men from homes on this block. She had watched mothers cry on porches. She had watched neighbors decide silence was safer than truth. But tonight, for the first time, she watched a sergeant walk out of a broken door in handcuffs, not dragged, not beaten, not humiliated for sport. Arrested by procedure, by evidence, by the law he thought he could bend. Simone stepped onto the porch behind him. Blue lights washed over her face. The neighborhood stood silent. Helen walked to the edge of the tape. "Child," she said softly, "are you all right?" Simone looked at the broken doorway behind her, then at Morris being placed into a federal vehicle, then at the neighbors who had lived too long under the sound of boots at night. "No," she said. Helen's eyes filled. Simone continued. "But this time they kicked down the wrong door. And for the first time that night, the people on North Calder Avenue understood that the broken door was not the end of the story. It was the opening. The broken door was not the end of the story. It was the opening." Sergeant Dale Morris sat in the back of a federal vehicle outside number 41 North Calder Avenue, staring through the rain-streaked window at the house he had entered like a conqueror less than 2 hours earlier. Now he was the one behind glass. Now he was the one being watched. The blue lights still flashed across the block, but the mood had changed. Before, those lights had warned the neighborhood to stay inside and stay quiet. Now they revealed every face that had come to the windows, every neighbor who had spent years wondering if truth could ever survive on a street where power arrived at night with boots and guns. Mrs. Helen Brooks stood near the police tape with her coat pulled tight around her shoulders. Her eyes were wet, but she did not look away. Simone Carter stood on her porch, barefoot, wrists marked red, father gold chain resting against her throat. Behind her, federal agents photographed the splintered frame, the shattered glass, the open kitchen table, the laptop, the recovered drive, and the black jacket on the wall. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The words had been there the whole time. Morris had not failed to see them. He had failed to believe the woman who told him what they meant. That was the difference. Agent Thomas Reed stepped beside Simone. "Medical team is here," he said. "I am fine." "Your wrists say otherwise." She looked down at the red marks. Then she looked at the broken door. "Not tonight," she said. "Secure the case first." Thomas knew that tone. There was no moving her yet. So he nodded to the evidence team. By 3:46 in the morning, the house was no longer treated as the home of a suspect. It was a protected federal scene. Every local officer who had entered the house was separated for statements. Every body camera was copied. Every phone was documented. Every radio transmission was preserved. The anonymous tip that triggered the raid was traced through an emergency request to the service provider. No one was allowed to leave. Not Morris, not Officer Miles Harlan, not Officer Carla Denton, not Officer Ryan Blake, not Captain Elaine Porter. Power had entered the house as a force. Now it had to answer as evidence. Captain Porter stood in the living room, watching federal agents seal the recovered drive in a clear evidence bag. Her face looked older than it had when she arrived. "Agent Carter," she said, "I want to say again that my department will cooperate fully." Simone turned from the kitchen table. "Your department had years to cooperate with the truth." Porter swallowed. This was Morris' operation. No. The word was quiet, but it stopped the room. Simone stepped closer. "One sergeant does not carry out repeated wrong address raids, evidence gaps, and anonymous tip searches for years unless the people above him decide not to see the pattern." Porter's mouth tightened. "You do not know what I saw." Simone pointed toward the laptop. "That is why we collected your emails." Porter went silent. Thomas looked at her. "Captain Porter, your city device and department phone will be preserved under federal subpoena. You may contact counsel." For the first time that night, Elaine Porter looked less like a captain and more like someone who understood that titles do not stop warrants. Outside, Ryan Blake stood near the curb with rainwater running down the side of his face. He had given his first statement. It was short, but it had weight. He admitted that Morris ignored his request for further verification. He admitted that the warrant details did not match the structure of the house. He admitted that Morris ordered officers to keep searching after seeing federal material. He admitted that the body camera captured Morris instructing Harlan to grab files and drives. Each sentence cost him something. Simone saw it when she stepped outside. The young officer looked as if he had aged 5 years before sunrise. "You did the right thing," she said. Ryan gave a bitter half laugh. "I did it late. Late is not the same as never." He looked at the broken doorway. "I helped put cuffs on you." "Yes." He lowered his eyes. "I keep replaying it. You said you were federal. You said your credentials were in the drawer. I heard you. I still moved because he told me to." Simone did not rush to comfort him. Some guilt needed to be carried long enough to become change. Then she said, "You have to decide what kind of weight that becomes." Ryan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "If it becomes shame, you will hide from it. If it becomes responsibility, you will tell the truth again when it costs more." Ryan nodded slowly. Across the street, Helen Brooks stepped closer to the tape. "Agent Carter." Simone turned. Helen's voice trembled. "I should have called someone sooner. I watched them break in. I froze." Simone walked toward her. "Helen, you called 911. After they were already inside, you stayed at the window." Helen shook her head. "That does not sound brave. Sometimes staying to see is the first brave thing a person can do in a place where everyone has been taught to look away." Helen covered her mouth. For years, she had watched police cars creep down North Calder Avenue like weather people could not stop. She had watched boys searched on sidewalks. She had watched mothers open doors with shaking hands. She had watched neighbors whisper afterward and then go silent, because silence felt safer than becoming next. Tonight, she had watched a door break, and for the first time, the person behind that door had the evidence to make the breaking matter. At 5:12 in the morning, the first federal command briefing began inside a mobile unit parked half a block away. The rain had stopped. The sky over Baltimore was still dark but lighter at the edges. Thomas Reed stood at the front of the vehicle with a screen behind him. Simone sat near the back with an ice pack around one wrist and a blanket over her shoulders. She hated the blanket. She kept it anyway because Thomas had given her a look that said she would not win that argument. On the screen was Operation Iron Halo. The case had changed overnight. Before the raid, it had been a corruption investigation with strong indicators and developing witnesses. After the raid, it had become obstruction of a federal investigation, unlawful seizure of protected evidence, potential witness endangerment, and possible conspiracy to destroy records. Morris had not just exposed himself. He had connected the hidden pieces. The emergency warrant for department communications showed that the anonymous tip had come from a prepaid phone activated near the Iron Lantern bar. Security footage from the bar showed Morris meeting with a known trafficker at 11:26 the night before the raid. Phone location data placed Officer Harlan near the same area 15 minutes later. Department records showed Captain Porter had approved overtime for the raid team before the warrant was electronically signed. Thomas looked at the room. "We are past bad judgment." Nobody disagreed. A younger federal agent opened another file. The search warrant affidavit listed a second-floor rear apartment, but the target address is a single-family home. Simone spoke from the back. "That language appears in at least 4 prior raids." Everyone turned. She stood and moved to the screen, the blanket slipping from her shoulder. "Search the phrase second-floor rear apartment in the warrant database from the last 2 years." The agent typed. 1 result, then 5, then 12, then 19. The room went quiet. Simone pointed to the list. Template language, recycled probable cause. Different targets, same structure. Same urgency. Same anonymous tip source pattern. Thomas looked at the screen. How many connected to Morris? The agent filtered the list. 14. Simone said nothing. She did not need to. The number spoke. By 7:30, the United States Attorney Office for the District of Maryland had opened a formal obstruction and public corruption review. By 8:15, Baltimore Police Commissioner Harold Vance had been notified. By 9, internal affairs officers were waiting outside their own records division while federal agents served preservation orders on body camera archives, warrant drafts, payroll logs, and complaint files connected to Morris Unit. The department building on East Fayette Street became silent, in the way buildings become silent when people realize old emails have become dangerous. Captain Porter arrived there at 9:23 with 2 attorneys. She did not speak to reporters, but the cameras caught her face. The city did, too. At 10:30, federal agents entered the records room. They removed boxes labeled Closed Complaints, Wrong Address Raid, Evidence Dispute, Anonymous Tip Challenge, Use of Force Review, No Violation Found, No Violation Found, No Violation Found. That phrase appeared again and again. Each time Simone saw it, she thought of her father's wrists. 22 minutes on a police hood for a crime he did not commit. No apology, no report that told the truth. No one held responsible. Only a daughter counting seconds from the sidewalk. Now she watched the boxes leave the department under federal seal. It did not heal the old wound, but it gave the wound somewhere to put its voice. 3 days later, the first public statement was released. Sergeant Dale Morris was charged with obstruction of a federal investigation, unlawful seizure of protected evidence, conspiracy to interfere with witness material, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Officer Miles Harlan entered cooperation talks after admitting that Morris ordered him to take the drive. Captain Elaine Porter was placed on administrative leave pending investigation into supervisory failure, warrant irregularities, and possible advanced knowledge of the raid. 14 prior raids were reopened. 6 convictions were flagged for review. 23 civilian complaints connected to Morris Unit were pulled from closed status. The mayor announced an independent oversight panel. The police commissioner promised reform. People had heard promises before. Simone knew that. So did the neighborhood. Promises were easy. Paper could lie. The difference this time was that the paper had been seized. 2 weeks after the raid, Simone returned to number 41 North Calder Avenue. The door had been replaced. New wood, new locks. Fresh paint that did not quite match the old frame. The repairmen had swept the porch, but one small piece of broken hinge still rested near the flower bed. Simone picked it up and held it in her palm. A small black curve of metal. A door remembers. Inside, the house smelled of sawdust and lemon cleaner. The photograph of her father had been reframed. She placed it back on the wall near the living room shelf. Marcus Carter smiled from behind the glass in his mechanic uniform. Simone touched the frame. "I did not let them take it," she whispered. Then she looked at the wooden hook. The black jacket still hung there. Federal Bureau of Investigation. For a long moment, she considered putting it away. Then she left it exactly where it was. Not as decoration, as testimony. That evening, Helen Brooks crossed the street carrying a casserole dish covered in foil. "I made too much," Helen said. Simone looked at the dish. "You live alone." Helen lifted her chin. "I said what I said." For the first time in weeks, Simone laughed. A real laugh. Small, but real. Helen stepped inside and looked at the new door. "Does it feel safe?" Simone took the casserole from her. "Not yet." Helen nodded. "Truth takes longer than carpentry." Simone smiled. "That it does." They sat at the kitchen table where the laptop had been open that night. Helen poured tea from a kettle Simone forgot she owned. For several minutes, neither woman spoke. Then Helen said, "People on the block are talking." I assumed. "Not bad talking." Simone looked up. Helen continued. Mrs. Alvarez wants to know if her son's case can be reviewed. The Johnson family still has the paperwork from their raid. Daniel Cho is scared but ready to testify. People are asking what they can do. Simone listened. This was the part no arrest could finish. The law could remove Morris. It could charge Harlan. It could force Porter out. It could reopen files. But trust had to be rebuilt, person by person, porch by porch, testimony by testimony. Tell them to save everything, Simone said. Letters, court papers, photographs, repair bills, medical records, names of officers, dates, times, anything they still have. Helen nodded. And if they are afraid, Simone looked toward her father picture. Tell them they can be afraid and still tell the truth. 3 months later, the first community evidence clinic opened in the basement of New Hope Baptist Church on Madison Street. The room was plain: folding tables, metal chairs, coffee in paper cups. A sign in the hallway read, Civil Rights Review Intake. No cameras were allowed inside. That was Simone's condition. Pain did not need to perform for television to be real. Federal civil rights attorneys sat with families. Public defenders reviewed old files. Volunteers scanned documents. A trauma counselor met privately with witnesses who shook too hard to speak in front of strangers. Helen Brooks sat at the check-in table with reading glasses low on her nose, telling everyone where to sign. Ryan Blake arrived in a plain shirt, no uniform, no badge on display. He had become a protected internal witness. Some officers refused to speak to him. Someone had scratched the word traitor into his locker before he was placed on leave for his own safety. He came anyway. When he saw Simone, he stood awkwardly near the doorway. I did not know if I should be here, he said. Simone looked at the line of residents waiting with folders in their hands. You should be useful here. He nodded. What do you need? Helen handed him a stack of chairs. Start with these. Ryan looked at the chairs. Then he smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. He carried them without complaint. That was where he began again. Not with a speech, with chairs. Near noon, a woman named Tanya Johnson sat across from Simone. Her son had taken a plea after drugs appeared in a bedroom during a Morris raid. He had always said the drugs were not his. The complaint was closed. No violation found. Tanya placed a worn folder on the table. I kept everything, she said. Her voice broke. They told me keeping it would not matter. Simone opened the folder. Photographs, letters, court notices, a repair bill for a door broken at 1:42 in the morning, a written complaint with Porter's signature at the bottom. Simone looked at the pages. It matters now. Tanya covered her face and cried. Simone did not tell her not to cry. Some tears were not weakness. Some were evidence that the body had carried fear too long. 6 months after the raid, Morris stood in federal court. No vest, no weapon, no command voice. Just a dark suit and an attorney whispering beside him. The courtroom was full, not with reporters only, with people from North Calder Avenue, with Daniel Cho, with Tanya Johnson, with Helen Brooks. With officers who had once feared Morris and now watched him answer to a judge. Simone sat behind the prosecution table. Her wrists had healed. Her father chain rested at her collarbone. Her face was calm. Morris took a plea after Harlan cooperation, Ryan body camera, the recovered drive, the Iron Lantern recording, and warrant template evidence made trial almost impossible to survive. He admitted to ordering seizure of federal evidence. He admitted to misleading officers about the urgency of the raid. He admitted to participating in a pattern of unlawful searches designed to intimidate witnesses and protect criminal associates. He did not say he was sorry. Not really. He said he regretted the outcome. The judge noticed. So did Simone. When the judge asked whether Simone wished to give a victim impact statement, she stood. The courtroom became still. She walked to the microphone. "Sergeant Morris broke my door at 2:07 in the morning," she said. But the door was never the only thing he broke. Morris stared forward. Simone continued. He broke trust in homes where children learned to fear footsteps. He broke case files so people without power could be processed instead of heard. He broke the meaning of a badge every time he used it to protect himself from the truth. She paused. "My father was once stopped because officers trusted a guess more than facts. I joined federal service because I believed power should be checked by evidence. On the night of the raid, Sergeant Morris proved why that belief matters." Her voice did not rise. "I do not ask this court for revenge. Revenge is too small. I ask for accountability that reaches beyond one man. Every file reopened, every conviction reviewed, every family finally heard, every officer trained to question his own certainty. That is the only sentence large enough for what happened on North Calder Avenue." Helen wiped her eyes. Ryan looked down. Morris did not. But his hands tightened. For once, he had to listen without interrupting. Captain Elaine Porter resigned before her disciplinary hearing. The independent panel found that her command had repeatedly failed to review patterns in wrong address raids and body camera gaps. Her public statement called the failures unacceptable. The neighborhood called them years late. Still, the changes came. Baltimore Police Department created a new warrant verification rule, requiring address structure confirmation before forced entry. Anonymous tips could no longer support emergency raids without independent corroboration. Body camera interruptions during searches triggered automatic outside review. Closed complaints tied to Morris Unit were reopened under independent supervision. A community notification policy required the department to repair property damage within 72 hours unless a court found the search lawful and necessary. Simone read the policy twice. Then she sent one line to Thomas. "It is a start." He replied. "You always say that," she typed back, "because it is never the finish." On the first anniversary of the raid, Simone stood on her porch just before sunset. North Calder Avenue looked different. Not perfect, different. Children rode bikes between parked cars. Daniel Cho had reopened the grocery store with new cameras and a sign that said, "Thank you, neighbors." Helen Brooks sat on her porch like the unofficial mayor of the block. Ryan Blake, now working with a state integrity unit, arrived carrying a box of files for the evidence clinic. A little girl from 2 houses down stopped at Simone's gate. "Miss Simone?" Simone smiled. "Yes. Are you police?" Simone looked at the federal bureau jacket visible through the living room window. "Not exactly." The girl frowned. "Then what are you?" Simone leaned on the railing. "I work to make sure people with badges remember who they serve." The girl thought about that. "Were you scared that night?" The street seemed to quiet around the question. Simone looked at the new door, then at the small piece of broken hinge she had kept in a glass jar by the window, then at her father's photograph inside. "Yes," she said. The girl looked surprised. "You were?" "Yes. But you still stood there." Simone nodded. "Courage is not the same as not being afraid." "What is it then?" Simone looked down North Calder Avenue, where so many doors had once stayed closed out of fear. "Courage is telling the truth while your hands are still shaking." The girl smiled a little, as if she understood enough for now, then ran back toward her house. Helen Brooks called from across the street. "That child is going to ask you questions forever." Simone laughed. "Good." That night, Simone stood inside her living room after everyone had gone home. The house was quiet. The black jacket still hung on the wall. Beside it was the framed photograph of Marcus Carter. Below both of them, on a small shelf, sat the broken hinge. 3 objects: a badge, a father, a door. One showed power. One taught truth. One remembered what power had done when truth was ignored. Simone touched the gold chain at her neck. Then she turned off the lamp. The final image in the room was the jacket on the wall, barely visible in the moonlight. Federal Bureau of Investigation. But the story was never about the jacket. Not really. Because no woman should need federal letters on her wall to be believed in her own home. No family should need a hidden recording to prove that a broken door was wrong. No neighborhood should have to wait for a powerful title before the law remembers its purpose. That night, Sergeant Dale Morris thought he was kicking down the door of a woman no one would defend. But behind that door was an investigation. Behind that investigation were families who had been waiting years for someone to listen. And behind Simone Carter's calm voice was the lesson her father left her. The most dangerous person with power is the one who believes he cannot be wrong. So if this story made you think of someone whose truth was ignored, write their name in the comments. If you have ever seen one brave witness change a whole room, share this story. And if you believe a badge should never stand above the truth, subscribe for more stories where the quietest person in the room carries the evidence everyone else tried to bury. Because at 2:07 in the morning, they broke Simone Carter's door. But they did not break her. They opened the case. They exposed the lie. And when the flashlight landed on that black jacket on the wall, the house went silent for one reason. The truth had been standing there the whole time.